but part of the title of today's event involves the economy. And so I want to, for that purpose, talk a little bit about the sustainability of what we saw in Chinese with regards to issues concerning rule of law, due process, and what's going on there with regards to a global economy. One of the things we observed there is not only capitalism, but hyper-capitalism. And when I got back, one of the people asked me how do I view that and putting it in context, I refer to it as a society of many contradictions. So you got a hyper-capitalist society with a totally planned government. You've got environmental concerns on one issue, on one hand, with economic-driven production concerns on the other. And so how are they going to manage many of those contradictions? So I would invite our panelists to discuss that for a moment.
Well, personally, I don't think it is sustainable. I just don't know what the time frame is. There was one of the big hedge fund managers who had a piece in one of the recent Fortune magazines who basically said, I'm shorting China. I don't know if he was shorting the R&D or the companies that make their living in China, but his assertion was that this growth rate is not sustainable, that inflation is going to really begin to erode purchasing power of Chinese, and that their capital allocation process, the things that they're spending their money on, eventually will catch up with you, because even though they own $900 billion of U.S. currency, it's not a bottomless pit, right? I mean, at some point you're going to run out of money when you're building bullet trains to everywhere. So I don't know what the timing is. I mean, we've seen this with other similar regimes, the Soviet Union being one of them, where eventually, either because the citizens demand better health care, better high quality air, and higher wages, they begin to voice their demands, and that begins to erode your competitive advantage in manufacturing. I don't know. Or it could be that other countries begin to undercut them. I mean, there's a host of sub-Saharan African countries that would love to be in the manufacturing process and would probably do it cheaper than can be done in China.
You know, one of the things that they're looking at, we do have to give them credit, they have had the largest anti-poverty program in the history of the world. I mean, 350 million people have moved from, subsistence level to now working class. And the question I think for them is, now can they add another 350 million? And after that, can we keep going? And that is going to be in my estimation because of just the way the governing structure. You said it's in part capitalism. I'm not ready to buy that yet. I think what we see is some market activity, but I'm not going to give them the imprimatur of being any kind of capitalism. But there is some activity going on. But can you sustain that? That is going to be an enormous challenge. That's going to require us to continue buying their goods. It's going to require them to continue to be in position against competitors of being able to produce them. And that to me, that's going to be one heck of a challenge. I saw an article when I got back about a gentleman who sold one of his apartments in probably one of those large complexes that we saw. 3 years after he sold it for 2.5 times what he paid for it. And he asked the buyer that he was selling it to, why are you so enthusiastic about buying my property? And he said, because the government's going to keep making sure that the prices I can keep flipping, I'll flip it right after you. That sounds like California to me. And we just saw that would work. And I just don't think you're going to be able to continue doing it, particularly on the scale that they have to do it with 1.something billion people. When you in a country where you got 100 cities with more than 1 million people in them each, that is just going to be, my estimation, one huge challenge.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, and that's the danger of China. I mean, the great temptation of companies, and we didn't really talk about GE or Siemens over there, about why they're there, because it's such a temptation and such a strong, deep market. Look at the founder of ENN started out with natural gas to taxi cabs, and in a short time, 20 years, he's a multi-billionaire. But here's the catch: how much do you think he's paying the government to stay in business?
Right.
And that's what's happening over there. Is they're allowing and pushing people to be quote unquote successful based on cheap capital and cheap labor. But as you mentioned, that second 350 million people, they're going to want a standard of living. And oh, by the way, the collateral damage to all this is emissions. And do you remember, we saw the dinner with all the entertainment, and I'm sorry we didn't get the picture of the guy who came out there, the juggler who came out there with the plates, the spinning plates on the stage. Okay? That's what it's like being in the legislature. You got this thing going, and you got this thing going, and this thing, and that's the way it works. And when I saw that, of course, we saw that in the United States 50 years ago. I mean, that was a cute act, and here we saw it in China a month ago. But I think their emissions part, that plate's been on the floor for a while, and it's only now that, you know, oh yeah, well it's starting to hurt them. And I like, Barry, what you said about, you know, that's all, it's an open furnace. It's an open, it's like without an exhaust manifold on a diesel engine. And that's all hitting them, but guess what? How long is it gonna take for it to hit us? And the key is, and you know, they, for example, they didn't believe that you could put carbon dioxide into the ground to enhance your oil recovery. We got Anadarko sitting over there. Oh, by the way, we were on the 16th floor, is that right? And having lunch, great lunch. You couldn't see it. You could look out the window and all you'd see is white. Because you couldn't see across the street, you couldn't see the ground. That's how thick it was. And I think, I don't know if they've come to the realization, but I think what you mentioned about us, our technology, they don't have the technology. They've got the manpower and the money. And they have a government-run economy, and we know how long that'll last. On a 5-year, and did you mention when winter starts?
November 15th.
Yes, November 15th. I mean, that's when it starts, regardless of the weather. Okay? We were in a cold building on the 14th. And the 15th it was hot. Okay? And
You can't turn the heater on.
yeah, it's controlled, the thermostats.
So on November the 15th, the chief engineer of the whole country decides it's now winter. And so the air conditioner is off, the heating comes on, and to fire up all the heat, a bunch of more coal plants, I guess, came on. That's one of the reasons the air was so much worse. So I was uncomfortable in my room, and I called the concierge and said, you know, it's really hot in here, is there anything you can do about it? And they sent someone up to open the window up.
Because it took a key.
Key. And I'm like, no, I don't want that coming. So being the aggressive American Texans, I said, you've got to have a fan or an air conditioner. And we had a little bit of a translation issue on that, but eventually we got it worked out. And about 20 minutes later, the guy shows up on a rolling pallet, an air conditioner, about like this, which I plugged into the wall. It slept like a baby.
That sounds like a note to end on.
And thanks for everybody. I will give one last opportunity for Phil and John. Have anything to add that you want to chime in on your impressions of China? You guys have obviously seen a lot. So.
I think this panel did an excellent job of really describing all the different aspects. But again, we have all the ingredients here in Texas to really be the leader in technology. We got the intellectual capital, we got all the natural resources, we got one regulatory structure per se within Texas. So it's an opportunity to really be very innovative and have a platform to export technology to other parts of the world. Great, Phil. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Get a little warm here too.